Caitlin Clark has signed a historic multi-year deal with NBC Universal, and in one move, the entire sports media landscape just shifted. This isn't a routine contract. This isn't a guest appearance. This is a power play, and the ripple effects are already being felt across the industry. For years, networks have searched for the next face of sports storytelling. Someone who can connect generations, break down the game with intelligence, and command attention the moment they speak. And now, NBC Universal has made its choice. This deal isn't about potential anymore. It's about belief. Belief that Caitlin Clark isn't just a star on the court, but a generational voice off it. Belief that audiences are ready for smarter, sharper basketball coverage. And belief that the future of sports media belongs to those who can explain the game, not just react to it. The announcement sent shockwaves through social media. Fans celebrated. Analysts debated. Executives quietly acknowledged what this move really means. Caitlin Clark is no longer knocking on the door of sports media. She's been handed the keys. And make no mistake, this contract sets a new precedent. A multi-year commitment from a major network isn't handed out lightly. It signals trust. It signals long-term vision. And it signals that NBC Universal sees Caitlin Clark as a cornerstone, not a cameo. This isn't just a win for Caitlin. It's a message to the entire industry. The era of surface-level sports coverage is ending. A new standard is being written in real time, and Caitlin Clark is at the center of it. And if this deal is the beginning, the next chapter is about to change everything. Eyes fire. When the news broke, it didn't whisper. It hit. Caitlin Clark had officially signed a historic multi-year deal with NBC Universal. And within minutes, the sports world understood this wasn't just another contract announcement. This wasn't a guest analyst role. This wasn't a short-term experiment. This was a declaration. Because when one of the biggest media giants in the world commits long-term to a single voice, it sends a message far louder than any press release ever could. NBC Universal didn't just sign Caitlin Clark. They bet on her. And bets like this aren't made on hype alone. For years, Caitlin Clark has lived under a microscope. Every shot, every quote, every moment dissected. She didn't just rise to fame. She carried expectations that few athletes ever experience. And through all of it, one thing became impossible to ignore. Her impact didn't stop when the game ended. She didn't just dominate the scoreboard. She dominated conversations. She pulled casual viewers into basketball discussions. She made fans care about how the game works, not just who won. And NBC Universal noticed. This deal represents something deeper than visibility. It represents trust. Trust that Caitlin Clark understands the game at a level that translates. Trust that audiences will follow her voice. Trust that she can anchor coverage, elevate broadcasts, and shape how basketball is explained for years to come. That kind of trust is rare. Multi-year deals in sports media aren't handed out for potential. They're given for reliability, preparation, and long-term vision. And Caitlin Clark has already proven all three. But here's what makes this moment historic. This deal didn't come after decades of media grooming. It didn't come after a retirement tour. It didn't come after fading relevance. It came at the peak of her influence. That's what separates this contract from everything we've seen before. NBC Universal isn't chasing Caitlin Clark's past. They're investing in her future. And that future spans across platforms, audiences, and generations. From studio analysis to live broadcasts, from major events to cultural moments, this deal positions Caitlin Clark as more than an analyst. It positions her as a pillar. And once that reality set in, the reactions poured in. Fans celebrated the move as overdue. Analysts debated its implications. Media insiders quietly acknowledged what this really means. Caitlin Clark has crossed into a different tier of influence. Because once a network commits multi-year resources, production, and branding to a single individual, that person stops being a contributor. They become a face, and faces shape narratives. This deal also shattered an old myth, that sports media power is reserved only for former champions with decades of tenure. Caitlin Clark proved that command of the modern audience matters, just as much as resume lines. She connects across demographics. She speaks with clarity. She respects the intelligence of viewers. And most importantly, she understands the responsibility that comes with having a platform this large. That combination is rare. NBC Universal's decision wasn't emotional. It was strategic. They saw the engagement spikes. They saw the viral clips. They saw how long viewers stayed tuned when Caitlin spoke. And they understood the obvious truth. This is where sports media is headed. Audiences no longer want noise. They want insight. They want explanation. They want voices that don't talk at them, but guide them through the game. Caitlin Clark fits that vision perfectly. This deal also sends a clear message to the rest of the industry. The standard has changed. Short-term appearances are no longer enough. Safe commentary won't carry broadcasts. And reputation alone won't hold attention. NBC Universal is committing to evolution. And Caitlin Clark is the symbol of that evolution. What makes this moment even more powerful is how intentional it feels. This wasn't rushed. This wasn't reactionary. This was the result of a clear pattern. Every time Caitlin Clark appeared in a media setting, the response was undeniable. Viewers leaned in. Conversations deepened. Basketball felt smarter. And that consistency is what turned opportunity into contract. For Caitlin Clark, this deal represents validation, not just of her voice, but of her preparation. It confirms that the work she's put in away from the spotlight matters. That understanding the game at its core has value beyond the court. And for fans, it represents access. Access to better explanations. Access to thoughtful breakdowns. Access to a version of sports media that doesn't underestimate them. This is why the word historic is an exaggeration. This deal changes expectations. It changes pathways. It changes what's possible. Young athletes watching this now see a future where their basketball IQ can carry just as much weight as their highlight reels. Where intelligence is marketable. Where authenticity is rewarded. And that's powerful. But this is only the beginning of the story. Because the real impact of this deal won't be measured in headlines. It will be measured in how broadcasts evolve, how audiences respond, and how other networks are forced to adapt. NBC Universal made the first move. And once that move was made, the industry felt it. Coming up next, we'll break down why this deal happened now, what NBC Universal truly gains from Caitlin Clark, and how this contract could reshape sports media faster than anyone expected. Because this wasn't just a signing. It was a signal, and the entire sports world received it. Fire eyes. When NBC Universal finalized Caitlin Clark's multi-year deal, it wasn't a gamble. It was a calculated response to a media landscape that's changing faster than most networks are willing to admit. Behind the scenes, this move had been building for a while. Networks don't commit long-term without data. And the data around Caitlin Clark told a clear story. Whenever she spoke, people stayed. They didn't just tune in, they leaned forward. That's the difference between attention and engagement. NBC Universal understood something many competitors were slow to accept. Sports media is no longer driven by volume, but by trust. Audiences don't want more voices. They want better ones. And Caitlin Clark has quietly become one of the most trusted basketball voices of her generation. This deal happened now because timing matters. Caitlin Clark sits at a rare intersection of relevance and credibility. She commands massive attention, but she doesn't rely on spectacle. She understands the modern fan, the one who watches highlights on social media, but also craves context when it matters. NBC Universal saw an opportunity to bridge that gap. They didn't just see an analyst. They saw a connector between casual viewers and hardcore fans, between younger audiences and traditional broadcasts, between on-court brilliance and off-court explanation. That's invaluable. For years, networks have struggled with a core problem. How do you keep fans engaged when the game itself is no longer enough? The answer isn't louder debates or manufactured controversy. It's meaning. Caitlin Clark brings meaning to the broadcast. She explains the why, not just the what. She gives viewers tools to understand the game instead of telling them what to think. That approach builds loyalty, and loyalty is what multi-year deals are built on. NBC Universal's decision also reveals something uncomfortable about the current industry. Many traditional media voices have relied on familiarity instead of growth. The format stayed the same while audiences evolved. And the gap between what fans wanted and what they were given continued to widen. Caitlin Clark's rise exposed that gap. Not because she attacked the system, but because she outperformed it. Her presence made broadcasts feel more modern without sacrificing depth. More accessible without losing intelligence. And that balance is exactly what networks have been chasing unsuccessfully for years. NBC Universal didn't want to chase anymore. They wanted to lead. This deal positions them as a network willing to invest in substance, not just star power. and Caitlin Clark offers both. It also forces other networks into a difficult position, because now the bar has been raised. Short-term guest appearances won't satisfy audiences who've seen what consistent, high-level analysis looks like. Networks that stick to outdated formulas risk feeling stale by comparison. And audiences notice. This deal isn't just about basketball. It's about brand identity. NBC Universal is signaling that it values intelligence, preparation, and long-term storytelling. That it believes viewers are capable of understanding complexity. That it trusts a voice like Caitlin Clark to guide that experience. That's a bold stance in an era dominated by quick clips and shallow takes. And it's exactly why this move matters. Caitlin Clark also brings something networks can't manufacture: authentic credibility. She hasn't distanced herself from the game. She hasn't lost touch with its evolution. She's lived it, studied it, felt its pressure. That lived experience translates on air. Viewers can tell when someone is reciting talking points versus speaking from understanding. Caitlin speaks from understanding, and that difference is felt immediately. NBC Universal recognized that this isn't something you can train into someone. It's something you identify and support. That's what this deal represents. Support, production resources, creative freedom, long-term vision. Those elements allow a voice like Caitlin Clark's to grow instead of being boxed into a role. And that growth benefits everyone involved. Fans get smarter coverage. The network builds loyalty. The game gets elevated. This move also changes the internal power dynamics of sports media. Once a voice is secured long-term, it gains influence. Influence over tone, over topics, over how stories are framed. Caitlin Clark now holds that influence. And she's earned it. This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about redefining what excellence looks like. It's about showing that preparation, clarity, and respect for the audience aren't optional. They're essential. NBC Universal didn't just sign Caitlin Clark because she's popular. They signed her because she represents where the industry needs to go. And the industry knows it. The reactions from competitors weren't loud. They were cautious. Quiet acknowledgments, subtle praise, and behind closed doors, hard conversations. Because once one network commits to evolution, standing still becomes a risk. This deal wasn't reactive. It was preventative. NBC Universal saw the future approaching and chose to meet it head-on. And Caitlin Clark is now one of the faces guiding that future. Coming up next, we'll explore what this deal means long-term. Not just for Caitlin Clark, but for athletes, analysts, and fans who are watching the media world shift in real time. Because this contract isn't the finish line. It's the foundation. Fire eyes. As the dust settles from Caitlin Clark's historic multi-year deal with NBC Universal, one truth becomes impossible to ignore. This contract isn't about what happens next season. It's about what happens next decade. Because deals like this don't just shape programming. They reshape expectations. They influence hiring decisions, redefine credibility, and quietly determine what kind of voices audiences will hear moving forward. NBC Universal didn't just lock in Caitlin Clark's presence. They locked in a direction. And that direction points toward a future where sports media values understanding over noise, preparation over persona, and substance over spectacle. That's a fundamental shift. For decades, sports broadcasting followed a predictable life cycle. Players competed, retired, and then, if they were lucky, transitioned into media roles built more on name recognition than insight. Analysis often took a back seat to entertainment. Caitlin Clark's deal disrupts that pattern. It proves that the modern athlete doesn't have to wait for relevance to fade before stepping into influence. That credibility doesn't need to be borrowed from the past. It can be built in the present. And that realization is seismic. This deal signals to young athletes that their basketball intelligence has long-term value. That studying film matters. That learning how to explain the game matters. That preparation doesn't end when the buzzer sounds. It creates a new pathway. One where players aren't just performers. They're interpreters of the game. And that pathway is going to be crowded very soon. Because once Caitlin Clark succeeds in this role, and all signs point to that, networks will look for the next voice like hers. Athletes who can think, articulate, and connect. The standard has been set. And standards don't lower, they multiply. This also changes the power balance between networks and audiences. Fans now know what high-level analysis looks like. They've seen it. They've responded to it. And they've rewarded it with attention. That means networks can no longer claim, "This is what audiences want." without proof. Caitlin Clark is the proof. Her presence validates the idea that fans are hungry for smarter coverage, and that hunger won't disappear. If anything, it will grow. NBC Universal understood that first. By committing to Caitlin Clark long-term, they positioned themselves ahead of the curve. They didn't wait for the shift to force their hand, they led it. That leadership matters, because when one major network evolves, others must respond. And responses reshape industries. This deal will influence how future contracts are structured, how analysts are evaluated, how production teams approach storytelling. It will push broadcasts to focus less on volume and more on value. And Caitlin Clark will be central to that transformation. Not as a symbol, but as a standard. The most important part of this moment isn't the headlines. It's the ripple effect. Every time Caitlin breaks down a play clearly, another producer takes notes. Every time engagement spikes, another executive rethinks strategy. Every time fans praise substance over spectacle, another network adjusts its approach. That's how change spreads. Quietly, consistently, irreversibly. And Caitlin Clark didn't force that change. She earned it. What makes this story even more powerful is how natural it feels. This isn't a forced rebrand or a manufactured media push. Caitlin Clark didn't suddenly become something she wasn't. She's simply doing what she's always done, understanding the game deeply and communicating that understanding honestly. NBC Universal didn't create her voice. They amplified it. And amplification at this level comes with responsibility. Responsibility to the audience. Responsibility to the game. Responsibility to the future. Everything about this deal suggests Caitlin Clark is ready for that responsibility. She's not here to dominate conversations. She's here to elevate them. That distinction matters, because elevation creates longevity. Years from now, when fans look back on this moment, they won't just remember the contract. They'll remember how the coverage felt different, how the game became clearer, how broadcasts respected their intelligence. They'll remember the shift, and they'll trace it back to moments like this, when a network chose evolution over comfort. This deal also sends a message beyond basketball. It tells every aspiring analyst, every athlete, every fan that preparation still wins. That clarity still matters. That understanding is still powerful. In an era built on speed and noise, that's a radical statement. And it's one worth backing. Caitlin Clark's multi-year deal with NBC Universal isn't just historic because of its length or visibility. It's historic because of its implications. It marks the beginning of a new era in sports media. One where voices are chosen not just for who they are, but for what they bring. And Caitlin Clark brings understanding. That's why this deal matters. That's why it will be remembered. And that's why the sports media world won't look the same once this era fully takes hold. This wasn't a signing. It was a shift. And now that it's begun, there's no going back. Fire eyes. If you've watched this entire video, then you already understand something most people are just starting to realize. This wasn't just about Caitlin Clark signing a deal. This was about the future of sports media and who gets to shape it. Moments like this don't happen in isolation. They happen because fans show up, because viewers demand better, because people choose substance over noise. And that choice starts with you. If you believe basketball deserves smarter analysis, hit the like button. If you want more stories that break down what's really happening behind the headlines, subscribe right now. And if Caitlin Clark's deal made you think differently about where sports media is headed, drop a comment. Your perspective matters. This channel is built for fans who want more than surface-level takes. We focus on impact, influence, and the shifts that actually change the game. And trust me, this story is only the beginning. There are more deals coming, more power moves being made, more moments that will redefine how sports are covered. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown. Share this video with someone who loves basketball and understands why this moment matters. Because when fans support thoughtful coverage, networks listen. When networks listen, the game improves. And when the game improves, everyone wins. Stay locked in, stay informed, and stay part of the shift. This isn't just content. It's a movement. Fire basketball.